Let's see also who is in the audience, because we would know to whom we are talking and with whom we are interacting. So if you're a student of a university, please just raise your hand, show us. Yeah, a lot of students. Do we have professors, administrators, teachers here? Yeah, good. And people in education business or thinking about education business? Yeah, a few. Good. Thank you. So I have a few questions prepared for our panelists, but also be ready to jump into discussion later on. And just to start with, I was thinking about EdTech and what do we define under EdTech, because a lot of people believe that education technology, this is something that encompasses everything, just from the simple use of computers in the classroom to, let's say, some teaching techniques like blended learning, adaptive learning. Other people believe that education technology is something more than just formatting some textbooks or manuals, or it's not even about technology themselves. So I would like to ask you, what do you think is EdTech for you personally? And I've heard some answer from Robert, but I think we can just elaborate on that point.
Okay, I think everyone has their own cases. And in our case, EdTech is not a hardware or software. When you bring a hardware to the class, it's nothing if teacher don't use it. If you bring a software without training, it's also nothing. They don't know how to use it. And it doesn't matter how good that software is. For us, EdTech is a complex. You need to give the best hardware, you need to give the best software, you need to teach the teachers how to use that software in a class. For us, this is EdTech.
Maybe I would continue. Actually, the question about what EdTech is, I think, is much more interesting if we start to think what education is. Because actually, what we mean by education and what is going to be killed or not by educational technology is really depending on how we define the education. And I think that, honestly, the education that we imagine in the form of 3 rows of tables facing the blackboard, and in front of that blackboard, the teacher is standing and saying some things about some knowledge, basic knowledge, and students are expected to reproduce it on the test. I think this form of education is definitely going to be killed, and not so by educational technology, but by the students and the world itself. So if we speak about educational technology, actually, it can be a means of saving the education in the age of modern education, because technology can support teachers and students in their learning. And I think that the best educational technology is the one that is oriented not on the school, not on the university, not on the teacher even, but on the needs of the students. So to enable them to grow and grow in their curiosity and innovation and creativity. So I think educational technology is something that is helping our students to get their education.
Basically, Oksana has covered most of the things I would like to say, but if we look actually at all the industries, not only education, if you look at the healthcare and compare it to 100 years ago, and we look at the classroom, it hasn't changed much. The same, as you mentioned, like same tables in the rows, blackboard, and teacher just stands there and tells stuff that might not be relevant at all at the time when the students are graduated. In the medicine, for instance, or finance, you name it, any industry, the progress went farther, because, well, we use nanorobots, we use lasers, all sorts of cool stuff everywhere. But in technology, for some reason, it just such a tiny niche. It lives in a bubble of policies of. Every school is a bubble, and it's so hard to get through this bubble in order just to, hey, introduce any sorts of innovation there. That is why it's been like going so roughly. And I totally agree that we have to do something urgently, because EdTech won't kill the education. It tries to save it, because well, in 20 years, half of the jobs in the labor market will be taken by the robots. So we need to adjust to those kind of sorts of realities, don't we? So let's hope that we'll manage to save it. So
yeah, I totally agree, and I just wanted to add a couple of things as well. I mean, I personally do think that it's mostly the reasoning behind what you're creating that makes it EdTech. Because one of the biggest things in the 20th century, back in the 1930s, in the 1940s, originally when the first films and the first televisions were coming out, what they were saying is that, oh, the television or the film industry would destroy the natural classroom and get rid of all these teachers, because you can just have an expert just give information and the teacher would just be there to turn a video on, and that's it. So you wouldn't need the teacher to be there. But we know 70 years later that that's not the case. That's not true. There is a need for a teacher to be, as I said, a kind of navigator as such, to help a student when they get lost, to help other sorts of students figure out what they can do with their lives. And not only that, but even in Finland, the teacher also helps a student to join other companies as an intern, so that they can actually get experience, because it's not just learning concepts in a book. It's about having experiences in an industry. I mean, I've been here for 2 days, and one of the things that I've learned about the industry in and of itself is that the technology industry, I should say, and actually he's in the audience here. He told me that it's great to have a kind of technology degree, but it doesn't mean anything if you don't have experience. And it's something that people, for the most part, don't really think about while they're in school. But technology has that ability to bridge the gap between the actual knowledge and the experience by telling people how good somebody actually is, so that they can get a chance to get that experience, or work with a teacher to figure out how they can get those types of experiences to help them learn better. So I mean, that's personally my opinion, but I mean, we can just move forward from there, I guess.
Yeah, thank you. So actually it's a wonderful point that maybe EdTech, it's not killing education, but saving it. So, but elaborating on that, what about, I will play a bad cop today. So what about the efficiency of education technology? How we can check that or prove that EdTech is working? So I did my homework and I found the quote of Andriy Tabachyn. He is the leader of OECD education department, and probably you know him because of the PISA test. So he said that like global spending on education technology surpassed $19 billion according to Fortune magazine. It was like 3 or 4 years ago. And our expectation toward efficiency of technologies is rising. However, Schleicher suggests that tech impact in the classroom is limited. ICT does little to bridge the gap. Therefore, some people believe that tech in class is a waste of time and money. So just imagine that Andriy Schleicher is here. And how would you respond to that? Is education technology really leverage the impact, the potential of students? What do you think?
Yeah, I guess I could start. So I actually looked up a couple of reports about this, and it was a bit confusing, I should say. One of the reports I looked at how utilizing technologies such as computers in the classroom could help or hurt students. And from what they saw is that if you used it sometimes, then it would be something that could help a student, but it wasn't very much so beyond what they actually did. But I would say this, it depends on what the actual use case that you're doing is, because EdTech EdTech can help with specific use cases, and it might not be able to help for others. And if you generalize it, then you're going to have problems. Because you're going to have use cases where it's not really going to be useful for that, and then you'll have other use cases where it's going to be extremely useful. So the report that I was citing just looked at, okay, these schools have computers, and it was a very caveman-esque report. These schools have computers. Okay, let's take reading and math. Okay, these schools have computers. Reading and math scores didn't go up, therefore computers don't help with reading and math. And the question was, is that, okay, what were they doing with the computers? And there was no answers for this. What were they, why were the computers installed? And this was something that we actually, with xEdu, we met with in the UK to have a long discussion and conversation about that they were bringing in schools, these computers and tablets and all these different pieces of technology, and they really didn't know what they were going to do with them. I mean, they really didn't teach the teachers how to use them. They really didn't teach the students what they should be doing. So what did the students do? They played on Facebook. I mean, that's literally just what they did. So of course it's going to hurt them in that regard if you don't have an actual plan. And most schools and most organizations don't necessarily have that type of plan that can actually prove it. So to prove that it actually works, we've taken the approach of using data and information, because we know that the data is not going to lie, and it's going to tell you whether or not something's working or not. And I do agree that we have to prove that something works in the best possible way, but at the same time, we need to have a defined structure of how we're measuring it, and not just saying computers, no increased scores, computers are bad. We can't do that.
Thanks. You actually reminded me of my programming classes back in school, where we also had computers, and neither the teacher nor, of course, the student knew what the hell to do, so we just played Counter-Strike on the computers. So, as you mentioned before, the EdTech isn't the piece of hardware, isn't a piece of software, isn't a teacher who knows something, but the complex. And if that complex seamlessly works, only then we may expect any sorts of results. Regarding the Schleicher quote, and I had a chance to see him also at one of those discussions about the PISA. You know that, if you don't know, I'll tell you that Finland is regularly scoring top in the PISA results. Well, I won't go into details, but what's the difference? Why the hell the Finland scores that high, and for instance, other countries are lacking this kind of scores, which also, like PISA, it's been skeptical about it. So let's just say that, in my opinion, that Finnish teachers, they train to be teachers. They're willing to innovate. They're willing to work. They're willing to give themselves to children. And when anytime, of course, it's highly strictly regulated. Any piece of technology that goes to the classroom, it requires a preliminary training camp for teacher in order to understand what on earth are you doing with this piece of technology, how exactly this game or this set of tablet of VR will help your students to proceed with this and this. So from our perspective, we as this ecosystem builder, we also understand this responsibility, because I'd say that, how many was it? 400 billion apps created and downloaded it last year from the App Store, from which let's say a billion was like EdTech, as them claims themselves, because nowadays any sort of app that they push on the app market, they say it develops motorics of the children. They, like, when you shoot zombies, it helps you to learn how to survive in the post-apocalyptic environment. So, and nowadays it's very trendy to say that, hey, my product helps kids, so you just please buy it. But in order to claim such as we've got an actual EdTech product, it has to be as any let's say, as any innovative thing around any industry. It has to be, first of all, validated and tested in the school in order to be approved and to know what the hell it is doing, how it's improving. So we work, as Robert knows, we work with this thing called COCOA agency. They are looking at each product closely and precisely. They are validating its pedagogical value, what exactly it brings to the schools, and they put their stamp on the app or service that we're providing, that yes, it is validating, it is helping teacher, it is helping kids in such and such way. So this kind of aspect is very important to understand, both for teachers, for the principals, for students, that not any product that claims it's to be educational technology, it has to be confirmed and validated. That's my point.
Thinking about the effectiveness of technology in the classroom, I start to think about my own classroom. And a couple of years ago, I am a computer science teacher in a gymnasium here in Lviv as well. And I had 6 computers for 15 students, and usually that's the problem for Ukrainian teachers, because they claim it's too little number of computers to serve 15 students. And we actually try to get more equipment into our classrooms in order to serve our students better. Then a couple of years ago, I have got more computers. Now I have 15 in them in my classroom for 15 students. So it's kind of better. I can say that students are getting more skilled in the usage of technology. But what I can also notice is that they haven't really improved in their knowledge when they are having this access. When they have been working in groups, it was even better for their learning than when they are working individually. It's not about the number of technology or the advancement in technology that making a difference. It's about what we are doing in the classroom, how we are dealing with this technology, how we are managing our students in their activities, which questions we put to them, which problems we want them to solve. And the problem is not solved by just the technology or software or just the skilled teacher. It's everything all together. And that report that you have mentioned, I have noticed that it was the data from the time when usually teachers were using this technology, like for making presentations or showing something, and students actually didn't have their hands on any devices. In the modern classroom, each of the students, and I can say it, each of the students is having some kind of device. And the problem is how to get them working on their devices individually and collaboratively and to solve some modern problems. And in this case, I think the measurements would be a little bit different. So if we are using technology just to, for example, have your electronic grade book or as a communication platform, or to rote learn some terms or just do some quizzes, it's one thing. And even though it might not actually improve the scores of the students, it takes a lot of load off the teacher. So the teacher can get more time to work with individual students on some practical tasks and things like that. So I would really argue with those remarks that technology is not working well in the classroom. I think it does, but it depends on how you do this.
I want to go back to the sample that Robert showed us, the virtual reality lab, medical lab. So let's imagine how expensive is that to build that lab in real. Let's imagine that number. I think it's 100 times more expensive than buy HTC Vive and install some software on it. 1,000 times. And that's and then imagine you have a limited budget and you want to spend it on one school or 1,000 schools. Yes, definitely the real equipment is good, and it's good when you have it. But if you have a limited budget, it's better to, I think, buy virtual reality or things like that. We have the same sample. And our project started from a program of Lviv City Council. They wanted to renovate classes of physics. And they had limited budget, and we started to analyze what's on the market, what to do, what to buy. And we understand that there is no good equipment on the market. So there is no equipment on the market. So you can buy very legacy, very bad quality equipment, or into all schools, or you can buy very, very expensive, and it will work several years, but it's super expensive, this equipment. And the city council bought interactive panels, and on these interactive panels, we have a software where teachers can show most of demonstrations on the classes of physics, chemistry, and biology. So it's I think it's a win, and every teacher in Lviv currently will have demonstration for their classes today. It's not a 5 years project, it's today. And sure, they can buy in long term this very expensive equipment, but today they can show these demonstrations to the children, and to work with this hardware. And we are teaching them how to do that. Without teaching, they will not do that for sure, because they know how to use this legacy equipment. Yes, if you buy legacy equipment, you don't need to teach them, because they teach how to use that at university. So it's a win.
So we are coming also to interesting really topic, because you mentioned that in order to integrate technologies in the classroom or education technologies, we need to have other components in place. And you mentioned teaching teachers some pedagogical approaches or validation of the product on the market. So I was thinking, how can we talk about like the ecosystem, for example, that enables education technologies in the learning process? And it would be really interesting to compare your experience in Finland and your experience in Ukraine, because we can see whether we have same challenges or some different challenges. So maybe let's talk about this.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, as far as ecosystem, so the main ecosystem that usually for EdTech in Finland is xEdu. They pretty much have a monopoly on that right now. But they also work with, it's not just the name, but they actually also back it up. They have this partnership with the city of Espoo in Finland. And what they do is that they have any of their companies that they would like to go to Espoo can go there and test their actual products there in real life and get feedback and understand if they're actually working or if they're not working. And it's something that is extremely important, because and to go back to the UK example, there was this, and with the information that you gave me about 19 billion being spent, many companies knew this, and many of the larger companies knew this as well, especially Pearson and McGraw-Hill and Apple. Apple's the best at this, actually. So they just went to these schools and said, hey, this is the new form of technology. It's going to solve all your problems. It's going to make kids smarter. Every kid will be a doctor. Every kid will solve cancer. And every kid will be able to raise people from the dead, and so on and so forth. None of that was true. But the money was there, so they just went for it. And that's what happened. But for xEdu, they've taken a different approach of saying, hey, this was tested and proven with the city of Espoo, and it takes a very long time to get that certification. And it has to actually improve the educational outcomes in order for you to get that certification. It actually has to show that you have made an improvement. So ecosystems become extremely important because this seal of approval makes it so that you're actually doing the things that are necessary in order to become a valid company, EdTech company that teaches people. Because at the end of the day, it's about the outcomes of educating people and not just what's cool and what's going to cure cancer, so to speak. So.
Thanks, Robert, for the intro. Well, first of all, I must know that we believe that innovation is starting with the startups. And that is why we decided to work through this startup acceleration, because if you look at the companies that have disrupted the market, the Uber, Airbnb, and the classic range of the companies, they all started, even at Google and Facebook, they started in the garage. So through the energy of startup, the innovation comes, and our job as an ecosystem builder is to provide them with the access to investment, to make them visible to investors, to introduce them, to get funded, to provide them with the, as Robert mentioned, the testing playground. We use co-creation term because it's not a laboratory where they test on the kids. Well, they do co-create it with the schools. And one of the examples I like the most is one of our portfolio companies called Mightyfire. What it does, it teaches, it decreases bullying in the classroom. It teaches kids to give their positive feedback to their classmates and making friends in the classroom. And their way from the establishing the company and going through xEdu program and then expanding, now they are working in Asia and so on. Their way was totally co-created with teachers and the kids, which is amazes me the most. Starting from the visual identity of the company, they started with some, I don't know, backpack as a logo. Then after the feedback from the kids, it transformed to the bear. Now it's bear with a friend, chick. So it's all being developed not by the group of adults, but the kids, the end user of the product, which is really, really cool. And I think this kind of practice, actually, we're now working not only with the ESPO schools, but also developing the partnership with Turku, other cities in Finland. You may not know guys here, but also with the universities. Now we're trying to start this partnership, also testing and just, how you say it, validating the product with the students and the future teachers as well. So that is important. Third aspect, we're bringing the gap between business, big corporates that are also very interested in developing, how odd that might sound, but still they are interesting to keeping the hand on the pulse of this innovation. And like Samsung, for instance, one of our key partners, they are deeply interested in all the VR, AR sets, because they are developing the hardware and they need to know what the startups need right now. So that is why they are also helping the teams in moving forward. So this is like the small island of the bigger ecosystem, because it's also like Department of Education, which also helps us a lot. And as I mentioned before, the education is highly legislated and surrounded just very, very politics business. So it's not that easy to go through it. In that sense, Finland is great because I should admit that our Department of Education is very open to innovation. It wasn't like this always, but recently they are inviting all the new innovation and companies to co-create with schools, which wasn't like this a few years ago. But now we're very happy to have this and to work with this. So more or less.
I think I may speak as a teacher, as the one who's going to use some technology in my classroom, and what kind of technology I would like to see in my classroom, how it's going to work. I would like the technology to be reliable. I don't want to have a plan B for my classes in case technology doesn't work. So that's something that is really important. I would like the technology to be relevant to the needs of my classroom and to the possibilities of my classroom. For example, a couple of years ago, it was 2009, I think, we've been creating some lessons, some online lessons for Ukrainian schools to teach computer science, and it didn't work just because the schools at that point of time didn't have enough internet connection to implement those lessons. If I was doing this today, I think the situation would be different because most schools are having this technology and students have technology in their smartphones. So technology and startups should take it into account, not something that is being created somewhere in the lab where everything is working perfectly, but in a real school environment and the real lesson, how it's going to work if the Wi-Fi is able to connect only like 10 students and we have 30, and how to deal with that. And something else which is really important is to do something that teacher really needs. For example, I have an app which is just great. It is called Class Dojo. I don't know if anyone is using this. It's for small kids. It's gamification, it's badges, it's monsters. You can play with them. You can send some feedback to your parents. You can send pictures to your parents from your classes and likes and shares and whatever. But I can't use it because they have a 5-point grading system. And in Ukraine, I need 12 points. In order to give my student a 12 point for a lesson, I would give them 5 and 5 and 2. And it really doesn't work. As a teacher, I want this flexibility. It's not something major that can't be programmed or can't be added to the software, but they simply ignore the needs of the teachers who are going to use this. The teacher needs the product to be flexible. It doesn't need to be fixed to the imagination of some programmer, no matter how brilliant he or she is. We need to be able to adapt the technology to the particular classroom, to the particular set of students, because in one day we can have one kind of lesson with the same technology, and tomorrow I am going to have completely different lesson with the same kind of technology because I have different objectives that I put in front of the lesson. So that's something I would like to be considered when we are speaking about educational ecosystem, educational technology ecosystem. Actually, what is really important as well is students' feedback. Because as someone who is experimenting a lot in the classroom, I feel that the students are really honest and open about their experiences. If you ask them whether it's working or not, they are pretty obviously going to help you and provide you with some pieces of advice. For example, students might offer you some different levels of interaction with the same software you didn't even think before, just because they are basically more creative than adults are. They are more innovative than adults are. So this is one of the resources that can be used for this innovative cooperation.
Okay, and I will talk about ecosystem in Ukraine. And unfortunately, we don't have such accelerators like yours in Ukraine. But I would say that okay, we'll have soon. But I think we are lucky that we are working in a good time. We are living in a good time, and everything is changing in Ukraine right now. And especially, we are lucky that we are in Lviv, because Lviv is very open to innovations and in education especially. We are, as a startup, we have to work without accelerator, but Lviv is very supporting us as a city, and we are developing our constructor 2 years already, and We are working with City Council. We are testing it in real schools. We are receiving real feedbacks. We are changing our product based on that feedbacks. And without the help of the City Council, it will not be possible to do that in regular schools, not in private schools. And we are doing that in regular schools where the equipment is very bad, and with regular children and regular teachers. And the same story I see in level of the country. The Ministry of Education is very open, and it's quite easy to receive approval and without any fees or corruption. It's for us it's very easy, and it's a good signals, and I see the nice opportunities to this accelerator and for our project to work with City Council and with Ukraine in general.
Thank you. I have just a comment, and after that we are open to your questions, guys, so feel free. Just a comment to what you said about the importance of co-creation, because we are working with teachers and we are working on developing the culture of innovations within the school, culture of continuous improvement, and a lot of initiatives, wonderful people who are creating some different products and services for teachers are coming to us and telling that it's really hard to enter the school, to make teacher adopt the technology, because and I think that the biggest problem is that they are not thinking about teachers as the co-creators or students as the co-creators of this product or services. So basically, co-creation and collaboration with different stakeholders is really important for the ecosystem. And I saw 2 hands in the room. Yes. Can we pass one mic?
Yeah, thank you for the great discussion to all the panelists and the moderator. So I think by now it's pretty much clear that traditional classroom education and EdTech will coexist. And there are some technologies or some approaches that people are talking about, blended learning and so on and so forth. But my question will be about basically what would you see in the future, because the goals of education is to motivate students to learn and allow them to learn more effectively. So traditional classroom from that point of view is great in terms of motivation from the teacher, teamwork and other approaches, but is really, really lacking the ability for the courses to basically be personal, to really adapt to the needs of each student. For EdTech, from the other side, that's what's in it. So the courses can pretty much automatically adapt to the learning patterns of each student and allow them to learn more effectively. So, in the future, how do you see this, basically, from these 2 points of view, motivation and more effective learning, EdTech and traditional classroom merging together and helping all of us to learn more effectively, because that's what we need in our lives, to get more opportunities. So what do you see? Thank you.
Yeah, so I mean, that's actually a great question, because we personally have been looking into this because there's a lot of different aspects that the classic classroom can't do. It's just designed not to be able to do that. So for example, as you touched on, personalization is something that the classic classroom is not made for. It's not made to be personalized for each individual person in the classroom. So to bring up the example of 15 students, and as a teacher, you don't have the time to spend 30 minutes a day with each individual student on every subject. But technology is moving to the point where we can know a lot of things. So for example, my background is actually closer in business development and data analysis. And there's one use case that I really like from 2002 or so in the US. So there's this company called Target. And they utilized a lot of data back then. You're smiling, so you probably know this story. So for everyone who doesn't know, so back in around 2002, they had a lot of data about their customers. And what they were able to do is they were able to utilize the data and information about their students, about their customers, I should say, in order to basically find out if they're pregnant or not. And then they would send them coupons based on them being pregnant. So they accidentally sent this to a 15-year-old girl, and they sent a lot of coupons saying, "Congratulations, you're 20 weeks pregnant." And her father got extremely angry. He was saying, "My daughter is not this and not that," and all these things. They apologized, but 2 weeks later, they got a message from him saying, "My daughter hasn't been telling me everything, and she is expected in March." So these are the types of things that we can peruse from data and technology that we can utilize and use for the betterment of students' education, to understand them more personally and suggest things that can help them in their everyday lives through the data that we collect. So for the personalization, I believe that it's going to be something where the teacher will receive information saying, "Hey, Oles needs to get more information about," let's say, for instance, I don't know, hydrodynamics or something like that. Yes, so he needs more information about hydrodynamics. Maybe this lesson will help him, because we've seen people like him get better with this particular lesson. Things like that will be the future of EdTech. So for your question, personalization that's how we individually visualize it to be, but I don't know if somebody else has a different story.
I can just briefly say that school is not a place, and Google was founded in 1998, and the kids or teenagers who are entering the university this year, they were born in the age of instant access to information. So you just go here and you get the knowledge. So I just want to cover and tackle like two main trends, I would say, like trendy thing. I'm not saying that it is gonna be like this, but it is a very, very high topic, a relevant topic in Finland, at least right now. First is phenomenon-based learning, which is training students to tackle some phenomena instead of going through the track of one subject. So they tackle one problem and trying to find a solution for that problem through the different angles, obviously. So it's working in the team, it's socializing, so having peer feedback and finding a solution using the information that is openly available in the internet. Why not? It's not like Wi-Fi isn't banned in schools. So it prepares students to the life they're gonna have in 7 years when they graduate, where it will be even more easily accessible, where the need to be sociable, not in the social network, but live, talking to people is relevant, where having empathy is important, where working as a team is important. So this angle is important. So that was phenomenon-based learning, and the second one was, well, it just popped out from my mind. So you may continue, and if I recall, I'll have a look. Yeah.
If I imagine the classroom of the future, I would imagine that my students would be using some products like the one you have shown us, and in order to get some practical skills, to do something with their hands, or for example, look inside the human body or inside some star in the galaxy far, far away. At the same time, the main point of my class is not just about that. It's about what we do with the information we have got from the devices. For example, if we do something with the person on the video, virtual person, thankfully, it's not about the course of actions that was taken by the individual student. It's something that we are going to do afterwards in the classroom. We're going to discuss it. Why have you done this and that? What were the options? And luckily enough, we can try the other way and see whether the risk was good or bad, whether it was the right decision or we should have taken another way. So it's something not about the technology itself that is going to be used, and it's going to be used wisely and widely, but it's about what we are going to do afterwards. The process of learning is not about just remembering things. And I don't actually think that the knowledge is in the smartphone, and the information is in the smartphone, but the knowledge is in the head. So in order to have it formed in the head, we have to work more than just use the technology. A couple of months ago, I have read an article about the AI teacher assistant in one of the universities, and it was considered to be one of the best teacher assistants ever in that course, because AI could have answered all the questions of the students very quickly, precisely, in no time, in the middle of the night and everything. But actually, in the same article, it was said that it was because students have asked the same questions all over again. So it's basically the same answer that any teacher would have given. It's on the syllabus, just go and read it. So AI is able to assist us in a lot of ways, but I don't think it's, at the moment, it's ready to replace the teacher in the activities that are going in the classroom, apart from getting the information. Because after getting the information, we have to do a lot more with that in order to get knowledge into our heads.
And again, I will talk by example. And we see the trend that a lot of new schools are opening these days in Ukraine, private schools. And they are creating competition with the regular schools. In these private schools, they are trying to use the most innovative techniques, the most innovative software, hardware, everything what is on the market, because they also have competition between each other. And in that schools, they can personally work with children, because classes are small and they have at least two teachers in the class. They have a teacher and a tutor, and also they have smaller classes for English, for example, for writing, and it's not 20, it's 10. So they can personally work with each children. But in the regular school, when they have 30 or 35 children in a school, it's impossible to work personally with each one. So I think the personal learning is a future, but it will change when we will decrease the number of children in class, and it will change because we have competition with the private school, and regular school will change soon or far, we'll see.
Thank you. Thank you for a wonderful discussion. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. And just to summarize our discussion, it reminded me somehow of the last book of Garry Kasparov. I don't remember the name of the book, a world chess player, but the tagline of the book is when machine learning ends and human creativity begins. So, and Garry Kasparov is much into AI. And although we are talking about education technology, but we're talking about humans, about human needs, about human values, empathy, curiosity. And I think the question or the insight that we can think later on is how we can use technology to leverage human potential and to enable every student to create value for the society or the world he or she lives in. So thank you for being wonderful panelists. Thank you for wonderful questions.